he's done this by realizing that when we're asleep, we're predominantly in this sort of paralysis state. But we're still able to move our eyes. This is why we see the rapid eye movement during dreaming. So I thought I'd wonder if we can use that to our advantage. If somebody becomes lucid within their dream, could they send us an external signal to let us know that they are now conscious within the dream? And perhaps we can then use this to sort of validate the states in other ways. And what they came up with was an idea of being able to sort of hook somebody up to one of these machines like EEG machine. And the dreamer will then, once they become conscious within the dream, that perhaps they can stand still, and their dream body, they would then move their head from left to right 3 times, and this would cause a specific peak on the graph that's produced. And at that moment, the scientists will realize that the dreamer, the unconscious dreamer, has become the conscious dreamer. And there's actually been studies where they've taken something like remote viewing. Remote viewing was developed also back in the 1970s, and funny enough, had exactly the same language in America, Stanford Research Institute. Remote viewing is nothing more than taking somebody's natural psychic ability and using scientific protocols such as double-blind sort of studies and other sort of devices to keep everybody in the program honest and help replicate results. So they took this world-renowned remote viewer, Joseph McMonagle, stuck him in one of these sort of cubicles where they sort of plug people in and lie down on this bed. There's no more in this cubicle than a bed, so there's not sort of much room for moving around. So they plugged in Joseph McMonagle. They had a control room with all of their computers, and they had a separate room set up with a monitor, and which was sort of being plumbed in from another room, from the control room. They then sort of locked the door, put sticky tape, masking, like duct tape type stuff all around the door, just to make sure that nothing could be tampered. And the idea was, once that Joseph McMonagle became lucid within the dream, he would then signal the scientists. The scientists would realize he was awake. They could then click a button on the computer, which would send a random signal to a database of images, and one image would then be produced, and it would then come up on that monitor, which is in that controlled environment which no one had access to. It was then that the dreamer would then be able to, through that state of consciousness, detect whether or not they can move within that space into perhaps a space that is very, sort of localized to physical reality, and actually see if you can perceive the image on that computer screen. And that particular experiment was extremely successful. It was an alpine setting, and the lucid dreamer, Joseph McMonagle, was able, once he finished the experience and got back into his physical body and woke himself up, sat down and sort of wrote down all the notes, left that little sleeping area, went into the control room, and was speaking with Steve LeBrook for a good 15 minutes or so with sort of debriefing, and then went off to the toilet, trying to flip the light switch and realized he was still dreaming. And this is what's called a false awakening. False awakening can be very, very frightening. Has anyone seen the film Inception? I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. This is one of the latest Leonardo DiCaprio films. And it's all about lucid dreaming, sort of accessing other people's dreams through the lucid dream state, and sort of manipulating their sort of mind from that state. And we'll go through that. Hopefully, maybe through the questions and answers, if somebody wants to ask that question, is it possible to infiltrate somebody else's dream state? And we'll wait on the answer to that until later. So he realized he was having this false awakening. So he then went through a process of waking himself up. And so then he woke himself up and found himself in that sort of controlled environment again, unplugged himself, wrote down his notes, went to find Steve, and once again he gave a debrief. And then on he went to the toilet. And once again found himself still dreaming. He went through 4 separate false awakenings before he was able to properly wake himself up. It can be very, very frightening, but at some point you are going to wake up. You haven't died. It's just that it may seem sometimes that through these false awakenings that you might sort of get that impression. But this is just one of the quirks of exploring the states of consciousness. But although it can be frightening, it's just one of those things like paralysis that goes along with the territory. You have to accept that if you want to sort of explore beyond the boundaries of this physical level of consciousness. So what's the application side of lucid dreaming? What are the benefits of lucid us is to be able to explore nightmares and bad dreams, confront them head on. Perhaps there's been a bit of dark content from a dream, a particular dark theme, maybe since you were a child, having this particular recurring dream. And maybe you wake up feeling a little frightened, and this is something that I just don't want to keep happening, it keeps recurring. This is typically because your subconscious is accessing something that probably needs to be reintegrated into your life. Maybe an experience of trauma that you've had earlier in your life. Some people call this the shadow. So I would usually recommend that once you become lucid with a dream, and let's say in particular one with a recurring theme, once you're lucid in that moment, let's say you have like an archetypal figure that is there, that's maybe sort of shadowing you for those years and years. It's come at you, some sort of big mind figure. And it's just about to get to you and grab hold of you, or maybe speak a spirit with you. Stop! Yeah, right? Maybe he'll have a very funny voice. And suddenly you start to shrink in stature. Maybe you become a duplicate of you and sort of giving nice to a positive meaning. This happens because ultimately what we're doing in these moments by confronting this content, we're taking back some power. It's just like in waking life, we project our sort of selves onto people, into objects and situations, and we, a lot of times, sort of create something much more than it actually is. So, to be able to sort of reclaim your power and confront these sort of dark aspects of dreams is an aspect that you can explore with the lucid dream state. Problem solving is another big one. We've probably all gone to bed at night with sort of a daily, real-world problem in our minds, and maybe woken up in the morning with that strange little bit of clarity. And this is because the subconscious has been working through this in different scenarios through the dream state. But can you imagine being able to wake up within a dream and actually use the dream state to, sort of explore different solutions to problems that you have in real life? Think about maybe inventing something. I'm currently on a 2-month tour of the UK. I live here permanently. I've been here 18 years now in London, but I've decided to take a little bit of a break from London, and I'm exploring 2 months in the countryside. I'm taking my passport with me. I've set off with no direction whatsoever. It's all about manifestation and synchronicity, and sort of deeply inspiring people that I come in contact with. And when I was younger, I hitchhiked across America for 3 years, and I found that it was, people were always giving to me, always ready to give. I found great sort of kindness in people through hitchhiking. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to pay homage to that 20-year-old self. Here I am 20 years later in my 40s. And, I didn't have much anything in my life at the time. Well, I had my family, but I didn't have any money. I seemed to always be running away from things. But on the road, I felt really comfortable. I had, deep experiences of synchronicity, and I enjoyed, sort of had people express with great kindness. So I thought, I'm going to pay homage to that. That 20-year-old that had all of that courage to sort of get on the road, ignore what everybody else was saying, go to university, go to college, make some life, do any other thing. I remember sometimes when I was standing there on the cusp of the Grand Canyon looking out over the North Rim and thinking, I wish I could just borrow my dad's eyes for about 5 minutes and just poke them into my head right now while I'm looking out over the Grand Canyon, while my other 3 brothers are sort of in jobs that they hate in their little cubicles in their offices, and maybe borrow their eyes as well, show them that there is a little bit more to life. Smelling the roses, and hell, I'm only 20 years old, give me a break for a little while. Maybe let me have a couple gap years or 2 or 3. So, I also wanted to sort of repay, in a sense, pay it forward, the kindness that I experienced at that time. So here I am hitting the road, and getting picked up by people, and then having no clue who they picked up. So, they picked me up, and one of the first guys that picked me up, he was a 20-year-old mechanic, and I was heading down to Worthy on the south coast. He picked me up, and we were only together for about 25 minutes, but invariably came to a point very quickly where he asked me what I did for a living. I said, well, I teach, but it's very alternative. And I started to talk about dream states and lucid dreaming in particular. And we discussed the different benefits, and one of the benefits was that aspect of sort of being able to create any environment of your choice, and then to sort of be able to use those environments to sort of practice things